Start. All right, so before we get into AutoCAD, just a couple reminders and tips. The first being just a little bit of file management and AutoCAD etiquette. If you copy a file into your working folder, be sure to rename that file. Don't keep the same file name. So if you're keeping a copy of, let's say, the EXUT in your working folder, be sure to put dash working your initials, something along those lines, so that we can keep track of those files. Because what happens is your Civil 3D objects only reference your file name in that path. So it's very important that you keep a good naming convention where all your source files are unique and different. Similarly, there's two other things that you guys should be aware of. Try to clean up your files in your folders. Let's say you rename your drawing files. Be sure to then go back and delete your backup files that are no longer associated with that file. Because if I go to some of these project folders, we'll see 100 backup files, but there's only 20 drawing files. So just be sure to do that. That's really important when we go to archive files and just keeping our data really compact and compressed. And then the last thing, kind of on that same subject, is whenever you get a recover file, make sure if you're not going to use it that you delete it out from your folder. Anytime you go to File Open, it should just be a list of drawing files that you're currently using. So anything with the recovery behind it, any autosave after a crash that gets put into your folder, be sure to just clean that up a little bit. Civil 3D objects, aka any surfaces or alignments that you have in your drawing, you start putting them into your data shortcuts folder, and hopefully you're referencing them then into your drawings. There is rarely a time where you're going to want to promote a data shortcut to make it live in your drawing. So my general comment is to never promote a Civil 3D object. There's only a handful of instances where you're going to want to promote it, and if you need to do that, let's kind of talk through it together. Promoting surfaces and alignments within your actual drawing is a really bad idea. So in general, don't do it. I've seen it here in a couple files, so be sure to not promote your Civil 3D objects.
What does that mean, promote, for all of us who don't understand?
So what happens when you promote your data, the first step would be to data shortcut in, let's say, a surface into your current file. When you promote it, there's an option to right-click on that data shortcut and promote it. What it does is it loses associativity with that source file, and all that data becomes active in your drawing. So let's say later on somebody makes a change in the alignment that you were referencing, but now you've promoted it into your drawing. Those changes are not going to be reflected in your drawing because you've promoted it live into your current drawing, which there's no real reason to promote things. So just keep that in mind. Everything should be a data shortcut. Nothing really should be live in your drawings. Let me see here. You noticed a couple things, did you? Let me see here. So a couple new templates for you guys. There's now PRPN, which previously you did not have, and something looks funny here. I don't know if I ran the update or... I did run the update. I go to drawings. I don't think I created the DWGs. That's what it is. All right, so there's a couple of new templates for you. The EXPN, EXUT, and then there's also the PRPN, and then the PRTO is now separate from the PRUT as well. So some pretty cool things going on there, especially with the PRPN and EXPN. All the layers have been created that you'll need for those files. So they're pretty simple templates, not many styles in them because they're just your raw base files. So as you guys continue to use those, let me know if you need something added to them. The layers that are in the PRPN are simply the ones that NV5 has as part of the layer creation tool. So there may be some layers that are missing. If you think that it's a common layer that's missing, let me know so that we can add it not only to the template but to our layer standard CMI as well. One of the things that has taken place since our last one is kind of a further refinement of our survey database. We've kind of changed and kind of coordinated with our surveyors in terms of what we're going to get and how it's going to import in to do our automated line work. So it's very important that, I don't have an email, but just know that any file that you get now, any CSV, should be hopefully here in the next month done and collected in the field in a way which should just be automated. All your line work should be processed without having to manipulate the CSV and anything like that. We've taken care of some of the commenting that the surveyors do and having that recognized in the files as well. So just kind of know that that's in the works, and you guys really shouldn't have to be modifying any CSV files to get that survey line work to work correctly. The one thing to note though, and something that Autodesk kind of dropped the ball on in 2013, is that the settings for your survey database aren't really synced with your drawing. It's kind of standalone. And so a lot of these Linework code sets and styles need to exist in your drawing. So you can't just kind of use this willy-nilly. You have to kind of be sure that, that these figures exist and layers exist in your drawing. They're not really connected, so they're not a database that links the two together. So just kind of be aware of that some of these styles will not display properly unless you're using the latest templates. All right, a couple issues that I've been made aware of. The first being the undo command. I know quite a few of you have had issues with the undo command, be it not working, not actually undoing anything. There's a couple things that could be causing that. The first being hatches. Be sure that when you create your hatch that it's not annotative. Do not create annotative hatches. That's a known problem with undo functionality. There's also forms that talk about associative hatches as well, that they can cause issues with the undo. So I know sometimes you need to use associative hatches, but just be aware that when you use them, you may start to experience issues with the undo. The other item that can affect the undo is using the mouse or the mouse wheel button to zoom and pan. That can also cause problems with the undo command. I don't have a good workaround for that because we all use the mouse wheel very, very wildly. Yes?
Question, if it's a known bug,
why doesn't Autodesk fix it? Autodesk has remained silent on the issue. They've acknowledged it but have not addressed it even in 2015. It's still present in 2015. So something that hasn't been an issue for decades has suddenly been an issue, and they have not fixed it in the last 3 releases. So just be aware of that. One of the things that can kind of help that, as well as just your overall functionality of AutoCAD and AutoCAD experience. Yeah, quit making mistakes. And then under your C temp folder, yeah, don't use my mouse wheel. Your C temp folder, if you start to notice that this folder is rather large and has thousands of items in it, just do a Control-A and delete it all. Having a large amount of files and data in this folder can slow down the operation of AutoCAD. This is the folder where AutoCAD writes all its temporary files. Anytime you open up a file in AutoCAD, it's writing about 12 different files to that folder. And so over time, that folder can just become inundated with a lot of items. And just the way that this computer system works, it's very helpful to clean out the temp file folder every once in a while. So just be aware of that. Nothing here is really needed. You can delete it all without any consequence.
Question number 2. If it's not needed, why does it say that?
Why does it? Because some of those temp files, the temp files that get written do speed up the opening of drawings. If those temporary files have already been written there, your file will open up a little bit faster. But over time, in the course of your project, so I'm talking clean that out every like 3 months, something on that timetable. All right. Another issue that has been experienced here kind of goes along with something I just developed, but let me see here, where are we? Layout tab. So under the Layout tab, I don't know how much you guys have used this, but dynamic north arrows. So what these do are they rotate to the view associated with your viewport. And what you'll notice, a change that's been made in the last month, is you no longer have 20 to 30 north arrows to pick from. You now have the NV5 north arrows to choose from. So all these guys are dynamic blocks, and they will associate with your viewport. Let me create just a dummy viewport real quick. So this is kind of the most common one, it's just the generic. The other thing you'll notice there is that it is reasonably sized to your paper space. So this mouse is really bad. So just know that those are all now developed for you guys. You got your generic one, your exhibit, your SDGenie gas, transmission, distribution. So those are all developed for you as dynamic blocks. They'll orientate to whatever orientation you have in your viewport. However, I'm going to say to use them with caution. One of the known Autodesk problems is that sometimes it can pretty much corrupt your viewport. What it will do is it will actually send the viewport to 000, so that when you go in here, it's no longer referencing your plan view. It will be shown at 000. So just know that that's caused by the dynamic north arrow and dynamic scale bars. It will happen randomly. Sometimes it'll be perfectly fine, and then the next day you'll go into the file and your viewport will be at 000. So use the dynamic north arrows with caution. If you have a rather complex plan view and you don't want to use a dynamic north arrow, know that all those north arrows are as regular blocks. Of course, those blocks are under the Q, CAD lib, SD detail library. You'll notice north arrows, so you've got those north arrows there. This first file, that's just the file that AutoCAD needs to read those dynamic blocks in your layout tab. So don't worry about that top one, but here's your north arrows. They're just standard blocks. You also have the same thing with scales. Scales are here as well as just dummy blocks. I have not developed dynamic scales, and I don't know if I ever will. So just keep in mind that your scales are all here as blocks to insert into your drawing. So talking about dynamic blocks, some things that have been developed. Starting to really get into pipe networks and just our storm drain design a little bit. I know that doesn't affect everybody here, but just to kind of show some of the things that are available. I'm going to insert these. Again, detail library. Now if you go under agency specific and then San Diego Regional Standard Drawings, you'll notice this folder called NV5 Custom Blocks. We'll go into storm drain. So you have blocks developed for basically the most commonly used storm drain standards. You know, some of these have been developed over the past 4 months. Some are new. So the new ones that I'd like to highlight are kind of the curb inlets. And we'll just check the D1 for now. Alright, so this is just the D1 curb inlet. There's your standard block. So what you'll notice is you have the line for the TC, you have your line for your flow line, you have some dimensions. All that stuff is on a junk layer construction line, no plot. So none of that will show up. But it's important to kind of know the dimensions of the blocks that you're using. So that's just a dummy block, nothing very exciting about it other than you can use it in planimetrics. But better than doing that, I would say, hey, let's use the dynamic block. So this is the dynamic block, which has a couple cool things associated with it. So you'll notice that it has 2 grips, this first one just being the insertion point of the block, and the second one is the dynamic input for the block, where you can click and drag it and all the dimensions of your block change. Now sometimes clicking and dragging isn't exactly what you want. You know, it's real hard to get an exact length there. So what you can do is at the bottom of your properties box here, you can input your width or your length of box, and it will change to whatever value you enter there. So you no longer really have to rely on drawing the right dimensions and specifications for your storm drain curb inlets. They're all there. So we've got those developed for almost all conditions. You've got them with your, so this is your type A1. So this is your A1 where you have your kind of side box associated with it. So this is a double grip. You can adjust the actual box itself and you can adjust the wing as well. And just like the simple one, you can do it both in this properties window here. So you have a 6-foot wide box and let's say total width.
So stupid question here.
Total width of 12.
Here.
Yes, sir.
And Jason, so when you're staking counts for these, what are you staking? Are you staking 4 corners, or are you staking the insertion point, or are you staking
We stake
for
the,
curb inlet?
for staking, we stake the street side, the 2 corners. Front 2 corners, and it's up to the box builders to know what type of box they're
Okay,
building.
the inside of the box or outside the box?
Outside corner.
And so that comes into play.
A little bit different, because we count the inside face of the box. I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
It comes into play, and that's why I kind of drew the TC line and flow line there, so that drafters can position the box actually correctly. You know, that comes into play not so much on the type A, but the type B, that comes into play considerably. Typically, we just kind of draft it and line it up with the curve face, but that's actually off. That's, if you actually built it like that, you'd be 4 inches off. So that's where some of these details really come into importance in terms of your constructability and accuracy of what you're actually telling them to get built.
And you're talking about top of curb, not bottom of curb.
Correct.
Rates, right? There's a
Correct.
1500 difference there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, this mouse is driving me crazy. So this is your type B. You know, kind of typically, you might line up this outside line as your TC, but that's not actually correct. That's not where the TC actually is. So, this mouse wheel is horrible. So just note that your TC is actually that point there and not this outside face of the box. So going back over here, you have the wings for both the right and left side of the box. And the other thing that you have developed for you is the part in profile view. And these are dynamic blocks as well, with the depth of catch basin being the dimension in dynamic. So you have it as drawn to 1:1, and then you also have it at the two most commonly used vertical exaggerations, 4 exaggeration and a 5 exaggeration. And both of those dynamic variables work as expected. Just note that on your blocks that have the vertical exaggeration, your V factor needs to be times the exaggeration. There's not a way to build an expression into it to multiply that. So you just need to do a little bit of math for you. The other thing that you'll notice with these is that they have minimums associated with them. So the minimum depth of your catch basin is 4 feet. So if I try to enter something less than 4 feet here, it won't let me. So I associated the minimums with these dynamic blocks to eliminate some of that user error. It has to be 4 foot, and it won't draw if you try to do something less than the standard minimum. All right, so those blocks are developed for D1, D2, and D3.
Can those be linked to pipe networks?
So that brings me to why these got developed. The way pipe networks works is very complex with catch basins. In my workflow, I've never had a catch basin be actually a part of my pipe network. Now, there's a host of reasons for that. The first being it's impossible to develop a part that looks like this in profile. You can do a general box, but sometimes it's not accurate enough. It's not exactly what you want. So it's been more accurate and more efficient to just use blocks in your profile and plan view. Same with plan view. How do you develop, 20 different iterations of a catch basin as a part builder in a pipe network? It's just not a reality that's really possible for us. So you really want to just use blocks for drawing those things and not really use your pipe network. That being said, I know that some cases you'll just want something quick and dirty, and a simple box may serve you well in your pipe network. So I have developed pipe network parts and styles for D1, D2, and D3. Just know that you're not going to be representing an accurate 3D model of those parts. They're going to be pretty generic. But if you're after something generic, it's there for you to use. It's just not going to be as accurate as some of the things that you see here, especially in terms of where that TC is and all those types of things. So you're better off using blocks, but if you're in a pinch and you just need something quick and dirty, you can use the pipe networks, and there's styles and parts associated for those. All right. Just another kind of quick note on just some AutoCAD etiquette relating to your surfaces and alignment and pipe networks. Make sure that you guys are naming your Civil 3D objects intelligently. Sometimes, the kind of the standard convention here at NV5 for a proposed surface is just PO1. However, that PO1, what is it for? What is it to? Having just a PO1 doesn't really describe it enough. So start thinking about how you want to name your Civil 3D objects, especially if you start talking about, well, what if we're developing a finished grade surface versus, a datum surface or the rough grade surface, where a simple PO1 doesn't do us enough. We need a PO1-FS or RG or some descriptor on our naming convention to really tell us what these surfaces and alignments of pipe networks are. Next comment will be on pipe networks. When you create your pipe network, be sure to then go back and rename all your individual pipe parts. If you have 20 parts on your storm drain line E, let's say, name that first pipe E-1, E-2, E-3. And that comes into play when you start talking about crossings. You need to know what pipes cross each other, and the only way to do that is with a solid naming convention. So start implementing good naming techniques in your drafting and design. The next thing, God, this mouse is driving me crazy. So let's just say we have a pretty simple alignment. All right, so we're just going to create a dummy alignment. Oops. This has been an issue that's come up quite a bit. All right, so there's our dummy alignment. Now let's say we need to make some changes to that alignment where it now kind of looks like something like this. So that's our new alignment where we change the beginning point, add a curve and another tangent. So we want to edit this alignment to reflect that. Some of it's pretty easy, you know, we can just start grabbing that grip, putting it to the new endpoint there. But how do we do those two new segments? Let's right-click, edit alignment geometry. And here's the thing that's important. You might think, well, let's start at the curve, let's start here and work backwards. Not going to happen. When you add segments to your alignment, you have to start at the very beginning of your new alignment. This may be kind of counterintuitive almost. So then it adds correctly. So that's the correct way of doing it. Always start at your very beginning and work towards where your alignment began. What happens if you don't do that? Come on. So let's say you just did it the other way, where we start at the end of our alignment and work towards our beginning. You'll notice it didn't actually add. Your alignment looks like it's good. Everything's there connected. But if you look at your alignment labels, nothing updated. So just be aware that when you edit your alignments, you have to start at your new beginning and work towards your alignment beginning. I know there's been a lot of confusion about that. So just be sure that that's the convention you use for editing your alignments.
Jarrod, another stupid question, kind of related. So consistently, I have a problem whereby I get a plan to review and stationing in.
Hey guys.
The stationing in the plan view is not consistent with the stationing in the profile, or off by 100 or even 200s. It seems to be built into the whole system. How the heck do you get rid of that? I mean, they need to be consistent, and sometimes the data tables do not add up to the stationing on the plan or profile, again, by 100.
By hundredth?
Lots of times.
That
You've got to be consistent, and I guess it's probably a rounding error. How do you get rid of that? And make it consistent?
That's kind of an AutoCAD setting in terms of the precision that we use for our alignment stationing.
Is that like a global fix you can do? Because
Well,
it's crazy to have that in your plans.
I can make a change in our template, and files moving forward will use the rounding rules that I associate with it. But that's a drawing by drawing setting. So I can't really make a global change. I can make a global change in the template moving forward, but it's very difficult to manage on on existing projects. It would have to be handled on an individual basis by basis case.
I think you need to do that because too often it comes up as that glitch. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but you're opening yourself wide up for lawsuits. That's happening.
And that can just be sloppy drafting as well. Nothing may be wrong with the rounding that's occurring within the program. It may just be some error on the OSNAP where they're snapping it to and making sure that the alignment matches your planimetrics. There's a lot that can kind of go into that. So we'd really have to investigate that at a case-by-case basis.
But there are some issues in the templates where in the profiles it's rounding off a different way than it is in the plan view. And so, I mean, again, I do think we need to fix the templates to make them consistent that way. I mean, I've noticed that in the past things that within drawings, they're not within templates.
So is it really just alignments and profiles and the relationship between the two?
That's the main thing I've seen it in.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that. One of the other things that is kind of important here moving forward is the NV5 spent a lot of time and money developing our template and some of this information. We need to kind of protect that information a little bit. And the way that we do that is really through our Etransmit Settings. So you'll notice this is probably what a lot of your screens look like if you ever go to Etransmit, that you'll just have this standard one transmittal setting. We need to change this practice. We should have a list of transmittal settings here specified to what we're doing. Is it an internal transmittal? Is it to a client? Maybe another civil engineer that we're coordinating with? Something of those types. So we're just going to go into modify real quick. There's a couple of things here that are kind of just courtesy. You'll want your transmittal to say set default plotter to none. You know, that can actually cause quite a bit of errors if your PC3 file is not found and you try to go to plot. It can actually kind of start corrupting your ability to make a plot of that drawing until you fix it. So just as a courtesy, especially when we're sending things to clients, let's give them clean files that they don't have to struggle with. So be sure to set the default plotter to none. We should also purge our drawings where they no longer have the whole host of styles and layers and everything associated with them. This will just give them a more clean file as well as kind of protect our intellectual property here. So be sure you purge your drawings and also set default plotter to none. The other thing that you really want to check on is to make sure that this is clicked or checked. Include files from data links. What that will do, let's say you're in a plan and profile drawing and you have your profile and in it you have your finished surface and your existing surface profiled over your pipe or over your roadway surface or something like that. You need that line work to come with your file, and that line work is coming from data shortcuts or data link. So for your clients to open that file and have that information, this checkbox needs to be checked on so that they get that source file along with your file that you're using and any XREFs. You have to include your data source files for them to get the full picture of what's going on. So be sure that that is checked. You also can kind of pick here in terms of your path options. I typically place all files in one folder, but you'll want to start developing some transmittal settings that are useful. So this is kind of like a good generic one. You know, if you're working with some other clients that aren't quite as advanced in terms of their software, you may need to down convert your file format. There's a host of options here. There's also these formats called drawing format with exploded AEC objects. If you select this, what that will do is it will actually explode all your civil 3D objects into your drawing, and they will no longer be, you know, your data shortcuts. They'll no longer be your surfaces or your pipe networks or your alignments. It will explode those intelligent objects and just have it be line work. So you may need to do this for some clients depending on their capability. So just know that it's there. Once you develop these, you can save them so that you don't have to recreate them every time you do an Etransmit. It's also useful to have one developed for internal NV5 file settings where you wouldn't purge, you wouldn't set default to none, where you can quickly make archive of all the files associated with your drawing file. You don't necessarily want to have to go to every folder that has an XREF if you're making a global change on something. So a lot of times doing an Etransmit is a very efficient way of just archiving your files where you're at today. So I'll look into this a little bit, see if I can publish some Etransmit settings. I'm not sure where they reside, quite frankly. I haven't looked at it at all, but know that you need to pick appropriate Etransmittal settings for what you're doing and who you're sending files to, ensuring that you're treating your clients correctly.
Jarrod.
Yes, sir.
Will the purge in here delete all the unused files or unused layers that get associated with the?
No.
Oh, okay.
Associated with the?
With Civil 3D objects that are not, being used.
No.
in a
Well,
drawing?
no.
It's just a standard purge.
Yeah, it's just the standard purge.
If I can just add something, I think it's important to unclick some of the things you just unclicked kind of as a matter of course. Like a lot of times our stuff have textures for materials even though we don't use them. And it just annoys me to end up with a bunch of textures that aren't in the drawing. Those get passed on, but I would always include fonts because we tend to use standard fonts, but what are standard fonts for us may not be for someone else. I would just, again, pay attention to all of those and don't just go with the standards because it's just a matter of needing it.
You can also look at this bottom one here, include unloaded file references. Sometimes you'll want to do that. Sometimes you'll have unloaded references that you may not be using this moment in your planned production, but you still want to include in your transmittal. So you may want that checked as well. So there's a lot of customization that you can do on your Etransmit settings, and that's why it's very appropriate to have a list of 5 or 6 different transmittal settings.
What's your experience on the transmittal package on doing the zip? And you transmit it to a zip rather than just doing just set a folder, set a file.
Usually I'll do a zip because usually I'm going to be posting it on an FTP site, and it's a lot easier for a client to download a zip than try to manage a set of folders. So I would still use zip. I think it's kind of the easiest and most uniform and easily understood by clients.
You've never experienced any issues with it? I always get it to where it'll crash.
I haven't. There's issues with that in terms of there's probably errors in your drawings that is preventing the Etransmit from creating. So it's kind of a bigger issue. You'll probably have to go through and run an audit on your files, and there's an application that Autodesk has published to kind of help with that, and maybe I'll cover that in the next Lunch and Learn. There's a way to automate some of your auditing and purging procedures. You can run almost a batch routine on a full folder, so it can audit all your files within your project and get rid of all the reg apps, any errors, etc. But yeah, usually if it won't create the zip, it's because there's errors associated with the drawing. One other topic here, maybe one or two. One of the new things that I've developed this last week with Ivan, actually, is file line types. So this will be included in the templates, but you may not be working in the templates, so you kind of need to know where these are. If you go to File, on yours it won't be pathed to this queue, but there'll be an AutoCAD line and then the _SD line types. If you click on the SD line types, you'll towards the bottom, you'll see a bunch of things that have been developed. First being just line types for existing and proposed utilities. So all the existing utilities kind of follow our naming convention, EXTO, and then dash whatever it is. I find it just a little easier to identify with the dash in there. The difference between the existing line type and the proposed line type is the existing line types will show up as dashes and then the letter, and then dashes and then the next letter, as opposed to the proposed, it will be a solid line type and then the letter, solid line type and then the letter. So we have the line types developed for, I think, almost all utilities, for both existing and proposed utilities. You'll also see a couple PNs, some PNs. I dropped the PR on them just because I didn't want a super long name. But PNEP, edge of pavement, that's using just some dashes as characters. And there's also one that uses a shapefile. I personally don't like using shapefiles because they don't really necessarily transport well to some clients. So whenever possible, just use the simplified version of a line type, but there are cases where you need a shapefile for it to really display how you want. It's also your 3 fence lines. The fence line with the X, which is typically used for like a chain link fence, let's say, uses a plus symbol so that it is actually, as opposed to an X, which is slightly obliqued, I guess. So just keep in mind that you have all these line types developed. They should be spaced pretty well. So as you use them, if you want things tweaked, let me know. It's going to be kind of hard to manage because I think everybody's going to kind of want a different spacing in terms of how often your E appears on that line. So we may kind of have to just kind of live with it, or you'll just have to kind of create your own file and kind of modify them as you go. But right now they display pretty well for an overall uniform basis, I would say. But
is it not edge of pavement style the same as the Egley ones?
It's a little different.
Is it?
Yeah. I can't do it in the description because there's, actually I think I can actually. Yeah, I think the daylight one doesn't have, it's a vertical bar instead of slanted a little bit. It's a vertical bar. It's also swell lines, etc., etc. So as you use them, please give me feedback. And then also if there's line types that have not been included yet, please let me know so that we can start building a comprehensive library of these things so that you don't have to think back of, well, when was the last time I used that style, and then hunt down the file, and then... Yeah, so erosion control ones, yeah. I need to incorporate those. Gravel bag, those types of things should all be incorporated here. So, once we develop it once, it's not a big deal. So let's get it developed and incorporated and available. You have a couple? Good. So what you can do is just send me the file that has them, and I can extract them from the file into the actual coding.
Where are those located?
So the way that you bring those up, if you're using the template, they'll already be defined in this pull down. They'll already be there. They're not in this file, but they will. But you can always load line types by just typing line type. And then under this load button, if you click on that, this is like a 12-click process. I wish Autodesk made this simpler. But yeah, you have to go to load here, and then file, and it'll bring up this Explorer. Should be pathed currently to your C drive, where you'll see AutoCAD line and then this SD line types. All these are located in the SD line types file. So we'll open up that one. Oops. And then it brings it up here. And then you have to select which ones you want, hit OK, and it'll add it to the list. So I just added those.
So if you're using a template and it's already got that, embedded in it, if you update that SD line types and start adding new line types and stuff, do we have to reload that file in?
Yes, you do. Once line types get loaded into your file, they reside in your drawing file and there's no dynamic attachment to that source code. It resides in your drawing. So if I did make any changes, you would have to reload.
And you said there was this automatically passed to our C drive, but this is on the queue, so is it the queue one on the queue that we want to use?
No.
How did they get on our C drive?
So the way it kind of goes back to the way everything is configured on your computers. Everything is stored and pathed locally to your C drive as opposed to a network location. That's just kind of how the CAD system was set up. I don't agree with it, but it's what we have to deal with right now.
How does it on our C drive get updated?
So via those emails that I send out
so
saying
batch
click
file
this
runs
link.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that batch file that runs for you guys.
Before you get to the part here,
Mhm.
one of the things I noticed when we were doing that is the Etransmit what it update. So if you change the line types in the master file, and when you go over to your sheet drawings, I have to reload the Etransmit in order to put the line.
Yes. Yes.
So, and it wasn't just the reload, I mean like detach and reattach. So
Unless you change it in the yeah. You actually have to detach it from your drawing. Yeah, because it's the way that there is actually a different way that you could handle that. You could actually set, I don't have any XREFs here, but if you look under your XREF in the line type, it'll actually give like the XREF name and then the line type. You could actually change that to the line type that's current in your drawing, and then it will pick up those new settings. So that there is a way to manage that, and that's probably the way I would recommend, rather than detaching your XREF, retaching your XREF, doing all your layer adjustment. I would just hard set the line type in your drawing to reflect whatever you need.
The other thing that I noticed is with some of the line text, I think, I'm not sure how it's defined, but we use standard text on it. So if I change the standard text to other than simplex, it messes up the line type.
Right.
So
Yeah,
let's keep that in mind.
and I don't know, what do you guys think about that? How do you guys use the standard text style?
I rarely use it.
You rarely use it?
I usually use the L10. I usually define my own text based on the viewport skill that I'm going to be using.
So kind of the thought on that standard line type or standard text style is to have it in every drawing where items like this can use it to grab that code understanding. You have to specify a text font or text style to use in your Linework coding. So right now they're all specified to the standard text font.
Okay.
So yeah, that does bring up something of you really shouldn't be using the standard text style for anything else. It just kind of needs to exist in your drawing as is, because there's a lot of things that start to use it, especially when you start talking about Civil 3D label styles. All those have to use a font, and right now they're all pathed to the standard font. So
Is it a font or a style? Because I heard you say standard style and the standard font. So
it's technically a text style which uses a
standard.
font.
A font
A
is called
font.
standard, or just a font?
That's a simplex, right?
So font,
Simplex, but-
Right, okay. Yeah.
standard,
Yeah.
it uses the font name called simplex. So all this stuff you kind of want to leave alone. Any fonts that you develop should be different from the standard one. They should be kind of left alone. The only thing that you could really change maybe is the width factor, especially when you start talking about some of your profile labels and alignment labels. You can kind of change the width factor here to kind of shorten things up. So you can do that. I personally would kind of prefer it to be 0.9 always, but it's kind of dependent on the application and how tight your plan space is. But for the most part, Yeah, standard should be left alone, untouched. So to get back to your question, you know, a lot of times I'll send out an email once I've made enough changes, and what it does is it actually references this file, which then in turn references all these. And all these files update, they kind of take the networked version of this data and information and pushes it to your C drive. So you can see it's updating the north arrows and scale bars, line types, pipe catalog for pipe networks, plotter configuration, survey database, and of course the templates. I think there was one other thing I was going to talk about. So, got a couple things, but I'm going to skip them. Any questions and experiences you guys have had over the last month that you'd like to share?
What about etiquette?
Nothing? Everything going well, huh?
Thanks, yeah.
Thanks for the update, Gary. What about the multi-title blocks?
Seems like
Yeah,
title blocks
yeah,
still
what about those?
still aren't adjusted appropriately, I guess?
That's a good question. It's something I haven't really dived into yet, but probably should, because that's not the first time I've heard that complaint. I guess a better question would be is, do you have one that is good? We all do. So is it a personal preference on which title block you use?
I think it's just been the 8.5 by 11s and 11 by 17s have been kind of I'm happy with my 24 by 36.
So where do you get your title blocks? Do you just go to past jobs?
Or the library.
Hey, Gary, can you move?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. I know that David did set up some title blocks. I don't really remember where they are anymore.
We used to have the magic button.
The magic button.
Yeah, but now the button's gone and nobody knows where they are.
So these are kind of, I don't know if you guys use these. Are these good? Yeah? So there's your answer. Here's your title block. So
So you need to grab like the I or something, like one's text and the other one's line.
Yeah, the I you inserted has the text or the title block as a attribute block. Insert into the right spot.
So do you guys currently use these, or sounds like somebody does? One.
Well, just sometimes you don't put on the specific title block you're going to use. You know, if you're doing exhibits or something, you may not put the SDG on or the county or city. You put on the exhibits.
It changes agency-wise too.
So how about this? Once you guys develop a title block that you like for something, send it to me, and then we'll start building this list up to include some of those things, like a standard exhibit or exhibit for SDG&E, or something like that. So as you guys start to use these and get them how you like them, let's start incorporating them into our standard library. Sound good?
Yeah.
But I agree, that's something that should be developed once and done. There's no need to recreate it or grab it.
So far, I wouldn't know to make it so
You
know what I mean? Like, full of other.
I agree. I hear you. Because I think they're also, that's just the logo. I would rather, or I would put them here under your detail library. To me, that makes more sense than the standards. There's multiple logos. I'm going to wait to address that till we get some direction from corporate in terms of what our logo looks like. Ernesto alluded to it a little bit today, that it's still a little bit up in the air and it's still a little done by region and by office and personal preference. But you know, I will say NV5, whether or not it says beyond engineering, that's kind of, you know, still up in the air a little bit in terms of once we get a solid branding image done, that will be incorporated into the logo, and we will use just that one logo. But yeah, I mean, obviously, this is the one that has been published. So.
Thanks, Jarrod.
All right.
Let's do it.
And sure.